Hello and welcome to another Sharpe special on History Hack. We are very excited today because Jason has been trying to get this one off the ground for a long time, because we are going to be talking all about Sharpe's rifles, which of course is Jason's favourite hour on Sharpe, I think. And he's got some of his chosen men brethren with him. So we've got Lyndon Davies with us. Lyndon, do you remember anything?
No.
No, true to form. How are you, Lyndon? We've been having a discussion before we came on air that you keep asking this like a dutiful, polite British person when everyone's answer is rubbish.
Yeah. I can. I'm not allowed to swear, am I?
Yeah, it's fine. We have the occasional naughty word on History Hack.
Yeah, we're okay as a family. We're doing all right. Life's shit, but we're doing all right. So.
Yeah, I think everyone's blanket answer is enough now, please. Let's move on away from COVID. Paul Trussell is with us from Southwest London. Hello.
Hello.
How are you doing? You've been constructive. Your art is taking off, and I love the collection of chosen men prints you're doing. There's Jason holding up the Harris one.
Jason, after a little bit of tension there, I think.
Yeah.
Since the first lockdown, really. Oh, that's one of mine.
Yeah,
very good.
That's you, isn't it?
That's a lino print, guys. Available. Just get in touch.
We'll tweet pictures when we send the tweets out for this episode so that people can see.
Yeah, all right.
Contact you.
You're on. Yeah, no, that's been keeping me going, really, making art. That's just two of my little sidelines, really, the Sharpe pictures, but I've got a little studio now in my house and produce quite a lot of artwork, paintings and etchings and lino prints and all that kind of stuff. And I have a website now, paultrussell.com. If you're interested in looking at my art, you can go to paultrussell.com and check it out. And there's also lots of acting photos and stuff on there as well.
It is brilliant on there. We also have with us Tim Bentinck, who is, of course, Captain Murray. Tim, hello.
Hello. Hi.
You've got plenty of musical instruments in the background there. Are you getting through lockdown with your guitar?
It's been like this since about 1982. My room hasn't changed at all. It's all the various different ways of trying to earn money, writing and music and things like that. So it's all represented on things that are hanging up behind me. Yes, no, it's, even to the state that you've got old CD-ROMs here of computer programs from the 90s, which have got gathered dust and I keep meaning to go through. It's really nice to see everybody. Everyone doesn't seem to have aged at all. We all seem to be eternally young. It's what acting does to us. It keeps us young. It's lovely.
Does. It's like magic. And we also have with us, and Jason's been very excited about this, we have the wonderful Julian Fellowes with us. I say Julian Kitchener Fellowes because Kitchener's my hero ever since I was a tiny child, like the sad World War I historian that I am. Hello, Julian.
Hello. Hi.
So Major done it in rifles, but you returned later on as well, didn't you?
I returned, and I think only I and Tony Haygarth played two parts in the series.
One more person, Julian. Peter Hugo Daly played two parts.
Oh, did he? And is he still going? Because Tony's dead, I think.
Yes, Tony's dead. Peter Hugo Daly is, but he's still around.
Okay. I love the Prince region. It was quite different, though, because I had to go out to the armpits in Ferropol and generally lay about in Russia. And go to Livadia and all of that, all of which I loved, actually, and I really, really enjoyed that. But the job itself was basically being crossed with Sharpe and then getting cut across the middle and dying. I don't remember it making any other demands on me, whereas the Prince region was a better part, but I never had to go further from London than the Richmond's house, and so that wasn't quite the same.
There's no partying in the Ukraine.
I loved the whole Ukraine stuff. I loved all that, and the whole sort of crazy caviar thing and brown cocks and all of it. It was hilarious.
So were you, Julian. I'll go after Marcus does his bit. I'll do my little intro as well. But definitely, you experienced Portugal and England and Ukraine. So you were
all trying to get out these 3 lines, which was about all I had. And I said them again and again in different terrains.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, there we are. We got it in the can in the end. It was such a drama, though, wasn't it? I remember all that, and the whole business of the football match and Paul's wife and all of that whole saga is now sort of gradually resurfacing in my brain.
Okay, we also have with us our Napoleonic historians, because we're way outside my wheelhouse. So we have the wonderful Zach White with us. You all right, Zach?
I'm all right, mate. How are you doing? Because we were up until 1:30 this morning planning a post-pandemic trip to Waterloo.
You left at 1:30. We were still there at 3 almost.
Wow.
We decided to pretend we were actually in a pub together. So a number of us from History Hack were sitting on Zoom like saddos in our front room, just pretending we were on a night out, basically. And Marcus was with us, but Marcus went to bed early because he's sensible.
Yeah. I left at a really sensible time because I had to get up this morning in adult and do some training courses with the army, which was obviously not as much fun as the pub with you guys.
Also, Princess Marcus needs her beauty sleep, doesn't she?
Looking this good?
Yeah.
and also, let's tell Tim and Julian that Marcus is actually the deputy curator or the curator at Apsley House, which
the manager of.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
Fantastic.
So he has a very good Wellingtonian perspective to everything.
We have done some marvellous ones where Marcus is skiving at work and he's hiding behind a bust of, I will edit this, don't worry, hiding behind a bust of Napoleon or Wellington while he's supposed to be working at Apsley House doing one of these. As ever, we're going to kick off. Marcus is going to do his little history bit where he explains the episode in context and tells us exactly whereabouts in history we are. So this has become a thing now. Paul's looking very confused. It's like the last couple we've done this, Paul, and it really works because it tells the listeners exactly where we are in the conflict and what's going on. So Sharpe's rifles, take it away, Marcus.
Thank you. Sharpe's rifles puts us right near the beginning of the Peninsular War, but not actually at the start. Bonner Cornwell has done something slightly strange and skipped about 3 battles in a short conflict, battles of Roliça and Vimeiro, most notably, and put us at the kind of dramatic retreat to Corunna, which was the fateful expedition of Sir John Moore, who ends up dying. He introduces us actually in this book, as it's first chronologically before the Indian books, to a scarred rifleman who might be from London or might be from Yorkshire, but he's scarred and he might have dark hair and he might be blonde. And he comes across a ragtag bag of rifles. But in the film is a slightly dramatic incident where then Lord Arthur Wellesley, not yet Wellington, has a bit of a run-in with some Frenchmen who I think have the opening line of the films of On y va, and they charge in with sabres, and he shoots 3 of them in a minute and clubs one of them, and is overseen by Major Hogan and obviously Wellesley himself, and saves his life, and he does him a bad turn of giving him a field commission. It's always then leads to a slight mythology that Sharpe is the only man commissioned from the ranks in all of Wellington's army, which is not really the case, especially in the rifles. It's one of these myths that has gone on that he's the only one, but it's fantastic history, of course. He's then given a command of the chosen men, who for real life context were effectively lance corporals, but in this dramatization, they are put as kind of like a little special forces squad attached to Major Dannett's command, where they go off and do extra special scouting missions. In what leads in the book towards the retreat to Corunna and eventually trying to raise the standard of St. James, they try to show that they've got an extra special spirit within the Spanish resistance. And this is all played out between the Spanish and Francisados, who are you could call them collaborators. And it gives us some beautiful moments where we get Captain Murray dying. Of course I'm going to do it.
Oh no.
On a sharp sword.
Is that the actual sword?
It is.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I'm sad enough to have bought that on eBay, but
what?
We haven't told his girlfriend how much it actually cost yet either. She doesn't listen to the podcast. It's fine. But yeah, so no, he has to wave that about at every opportunity to get his money's worth. God love it.
And so, and then we have a great introduction to Sharpe and all of his adventures with his chosen man squads.
Speaking of, Jason, do you want to add anything?
Yes, I just want to say that a lot of people know that this is my favourite episode, and it's also for what's in the episode, for also what went on behind the scenes. So the guys on the show today all are Sharpe for me. They have never left my mind's eye of Sharpe. Julian and Tim came out on the plane, I believe, on the first time, right, Julian? I know Tim did, right? So, and they were there at the very end as well at Portugal, and they went through all the various things. And I
wasn't in Portugal. I was only in the Crimea.
You were only in the Crimea? Are you sure?
Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, all right. So you did the scene.
I died twice, once with Paul and once with Sean.
But I remember we were in the Crimea together, because once when we were lying in this tent waiting to be used on sort of daybeds, and the head of wardrobe came towards me and she said to me that she'd been talking with these two assistants, and she said to me, they want to know if you are of noble blood. And I said, why? And she said, because if you are, they will darn your socks. And so I said, well, Tim's the man you want to go to. He can have his socks darned. And that was that. I loved that, having survived the revolution.
I'd forgotten that. I remember now. Yeah.
Was that Helen Kramova, our cousin lady?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
But Tim, you were in Portugal, because the scene where you discovered Sean and Dara fighting, that was shot in Portugal, where you both arrive with Lyndon. Lyndon says, anyone seen the officer? And then you guys come in and find the brawling. That was in Portugal, Tim, I'm afraid to tell you.
I have no recollection of going to Portugal.
Lyndon's got a friend who remembers nothing. It's great.
Yeah.
Vindication, Lyndon.
I'm quite certain that wasn't. I mean, it might have been that, that my point of view shot was shot in Portugal, and that you came round on me and I was still in the Crimea. But as far as I know, I never went to Portugal. You were in Turkey.
No, you definitely did. You definitely, because that scene where you, Murray and Bentinck, Murray and Dunnett arrive at the barn, that's absolutely on the far west coast of Portugal, just above Lisbon, where we were. Absolutely. Because we shot it first in August at a place called Shufut Cali, boiling hot in that little Jewish settlement. Was all stone. Remember, there was a little hovel.
Yeah.
So that's where we first shot the scene. That was all scrapped.
Oh, right.
I've
got photographs of Julian sitting there. I remember that one.
Yeah. And I got some, exactly. Julian, there's a picture of me with Julian behind me.
Yeah.
And then, so I don't think you shot the death scene there. I think it was only shot in Portugal, because I got a picture of you, the one I put on Facebook, of you covered in blood eating a sandwich. My very first walk into Simferopol was with Julian, who gave the most wonderful running commentary of everything. Were you there, Lyndon?
No, I remember something I remember of this Julian.
Were you there, Paul?
Where he gave the sort of...
Anyway, so we... Oh, Lyndon, what did you remember? Sorry.
Natasha's like, focus quick before Lyndon forgets again.
I've forgotten it now.
Okay. So anyway,
obviously.
It was our first encounter with loads of money changers. But I do remember I was in the throes of breaking up in a relationship, and Julian was really probing me on it. Like, tell me a bit more. How was it? What were the circumstances? And obviously he was writing a soap opera, I guess, and that's why he was probing. But the one thing, I mentioned this to Julian in a little email, we encountered this thing called kvass, which is a fermented drink made from bread.
That explains the memory loss.
Yeah, totally. And we were all like really scared, but Julian wasn't, because when he was a child living in Africa, his mother made him drink this orange drink concoction from the street vendors, and from then on he's had no tummy troubles whatsoever.
Only from water. I've had other tummy troubles.
Oh, okay. But I really remember that.
And a good boy. I seem to remember drinking quite a lot of it.
Well done.
Kvass.
It's sorted you out. And Tim Bentinck. I had read Rifles, and I read Recollections of Rifle from Harris as part of my research for the part. And we got to the read-through St. Saviour's Church back in July 26th of 1992.
I do remember that very well.
Yes, and I was talking to you about it, and you really ignited my passion for the novels because you had read them all. He said, because I read it as research. My character didn't appear in the books. It was like, but Tim, you really ignited my love for the books.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it was I read all the Hornblower books. I'm actually doing again Richard Woodman books, the Nathaniel Drinkwater, Patrick O'Brien. It's all the sailing ones that I've been into. And then I got into Sharpe, and I'd read all the Sharpe books, completely loved them. So when I got the call to come and audition for it, it was like heaven. And then I got the part, and it was even more heaven. And then turned up, and I kind of knew, I knew all the characters already. I walked into the church, everybody doing the read through, and that's you. It was fantastic. And I mean, it was
affected me with the bug.
Oh well, that's great. I mean, you guys, the Chosen Men. It was it was such a part of your life, and you all nearly died doing it. I mean, really, really. But just for me and Julian, we were there for a bit, and we were, as you say, kind of the pathfinders. We were the first lot to kind of go and do it. And it was one of the greatest adventures of my life. And I really regretted dying, and not being allowed to come back. I kept saying to them, look, I can grow a beard and come back as a Russian. I come back as Russian with beard and come back. They will never know I am Captain Mark. And they, of course, they didn't. But Fellowes, of course, got the.
I was allowed to rise from the dead and return in a different guise.
Yeah.
But I always enjoyed my death. I remember that I had to come up to the horse with the guy with the sword, and he then did that. And then everything stopped, and I was put into a different uniform top with a slash across the top, into which someone had gone to a butcher and acquired a whole lot of entrails of a pig. And they were then pushed down into this slice across the front of my jacket so that they were all spilling out when the camera came round. It was rather effective, actually.
I wrote an autobiography, which is called Being David Archer and Other Unusual Ways of Earning a Living. And there's a chapter in it called Sharpe's Rifles. Can I just read you a paragraph of this, which is to do exactly that, to do with death. The adventures that followed. We were transported by a minibus to Simferopol town centre, immediately dubbed Simply Awful, a faceless hotel looking out onto washing lines. Welcome to Crimea. The adventures that followed made up for it. I was soon facing a cavalry charge of 20 Cossacks dressed up as French hussars, swords drawn, coming at me at full gallop, led by the guy who was supposed to slash me across the chest. He was a Scot on horseback. And I imagined, therefore, spurred on by acts of woad-painted, Sassenach-hating frenzy. The camera crew was safely tucked behind strongly built wooden barriers, and I was in front of them, alone, with a sword. No acting required here, then. Having been sliced, he actually missed me by about 6 inches. I had to stagger midst the onrushing cavalry and collapse on the hill, whence to be carried off to die by Jason, who has very muscular but bony shoulders. And you've got a kind of a bit there. You've got really bony. And I remember you pulled me over your back, and you were desperate to take me up the hill. And I'm, 6'3", and you were coming like that. And all I could feel was his bloody bones sticking to me.
It could have been your crossbelt as well.
You had to.
But I had bony shoulders. You're right.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. I was wondering recently, because people always talk about Sharpe and his sword. But Sharpe doesn't buy his sword. He doesn't choose his sword. He's given the sword
by me,
by you. So were you given any sort of backstory on that? Because it's such an unusual, because it's a heavy cavalry sword. It's so impractical for hand-to-hand combat on foot. That's why it's like famous, infamous.
So how many episodes did he carry it for? Did he carry it from then on?
Yes, so that's it. He carries that sword from then on. He breaks it in Sharpe's sword. And Harper makes him a new one from a cuirassier heavy cavalry sword, French heavy cavalry sword. But I think actually he gets his old one back anyway from the prop department magic anyway. So yeah, it becomes a huge part of like Sharpe's personality. He's referred to as a tall, scarred officer with a very long, impractical, heavy sword in the books. But he didn't choose it. You have.
I turned up, and they went to the costume department, and they gave me the costume, and to the props department they gave me the sword. That was it. And
I think there's a whole backstory to Captain Murray, the legend of rising Captain Murray that's never been told.
Well, not really, because there isn't that much more of him in the books. I mean, there is a bit more. He does feature a bit more in the books, but not to the extent of knowing, that the sword was handed down to him by his great-grandfather with, all that kind of thing. There isn't any of that at all. No.
I will say, Tim, that you are present, because that scene, and brilliantly acted, by the way, is probably one of the best scenes in the whole 15 episodes. And it sets everything up by saying, Sharpe, you will be hated by the posh people, and you'll be hated by the oiks because you are now an officer.
Yeah.
Get Patrick Harper on your side.
Yeah.
Too. And here's my sword. I mean,
So
that's three things that completely set up the character
And
and
he says-
stay with us the whole. So in many ways, the spirit of Murray carries on through because of that scene, because of how well. And the fact that you say bloody silly place to die and then die. I mean, how brilliant the timing of that. I mean,
well, I know. I remember he said, "What? So you'll think I'm a proper officer?" And I say, "No." So they'll think I liked you.
Yes. Oh, beautifully delivered.
And then in the script, it goes, bloody silly way to die. He dies, which is kind of weird because you've got the energy and the thought to say bloody silly place to die as you're expiring. And being film, you haven't got the time that would actually take, which would be a kind of a good 5 minutes of kind of expiring. No, it's come on, get a move on. We've only got 30 minutes here. Die. And so then I did. And there's a question that came up that you sent me with an email.
There's a couple of questions about.
We'll get to it, Tim. We'll get to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's Alex Wyman. I really liked his because I think he was quite small when it came out. And he said, as a child, when Sharpe came out, I remember how dead you looked and thinking, how long did he have to hold his breath for? Or he actually pondered whether they did kill you for effect. He said, do actors have to practice holding their breath and keeping their eyes open?
Well, I know it's a lovely answer. I mean, the thing about that is, as we all know, I'm sure we've all died on stage, and that's always difficult because you usually die after a battle, after fight. And so you have to die on stage and then lie there in front of the audience, and you just, you're exhausted. So you're breathing like mad, and you've got to kind of pretend not to. But on screen, they're only on your face. And I think, when I looked at it when it came out, I think they froze frame. And that's why it looks so dead. That you turn like that, you keep your eyes open, and then they actually freeze the frame so that it becomes a still, and that gives that impression of total death. I'm not sure that I was good enough.
I couldn't see that. I didn't tell that. I couldn't tell that.
Well, there was one little person that was scarred for life watching it. There's a lot of people saying that.
So it wasn't a wasted effort.
The night before we left for our first shooting day, which was at Apethorpe Manor, Lyndon, myself, and Paul, we went and got sandwiches at Marks and Spencer's, and we went and sat at my house watching the Olympics, waiting to take the train to the coach to Apethorpe Manor. So all of those memories are just so indelibly intertwined with that early period of Sharpe. So I'm really happy with everyone who's here today.
Brilliant. And we have, as usual, got lots of questions from listeners. We've just given Tim one of his. Actually, someone, more than one person, flagged up that you have Napoleonic ancestry, don't you, in William Cavendish Bentinck?
Well, it's quite understandable that they should get it wrong, but it's not my family. It's a different branch of the family. But I do, not him. But there's a chap called there's General Sir Henry Bentinck, who led the Coldstream Guards across the Alma, and there's a painting of him. In fact, I was trying to find it on Google yesterday. I can't find it. And that was the weird thing, that there we were in the tents with the Russian army who were playing extras, about 5 miles up the road from where my direct ancestor, in fact, he's a great uncle, great uncle, was doing the real thing. And here we were playing at it. My ancestor was just up the road doing the thing for real, but it's not Cavendish Bentinck, it's a different one.
I do love as well that Dave Barraclough wrote in and said, what does it feel like dying in something where Sean Bean actually survives?
Well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to monopolise the conversation here. Let's go to other people. But there is a little story to that. In that, years later, I had 3 recalls to play Boromir in Lord of the Rings, which and I think it was down to between me and Sean. And if you look at the scene where Boromir dies, he's got foul arrows in him, like a hedgehog with all these arrows in him, and he dies. And I seem to remember this ages ago, but I seem to remember thinking, "You nicked my death, you bastard," because he kind of goes, "I'm going to die now," and he does a little head turn, which is nicked from Murray. I think he stole my death, the bastard.
Imitation is flattery. Well, go with that, right? There's a brilliant one for Julian, because obviously you're an amazing writer as well as an actor, and I had to shoo my mother from the room, and actually my co-host Alina is marginally excited that the man who brought the world Downton Abbey is on our Zoom this morning. But they were asking, how did your time in Sharpe influence your writing? Have bits of Sharpe and bits of the experience worked their way into anything else that you've done?
I don't think you can say that specifically in that way. I mean, I think having been an actor is very, very helpful to being a writer, because particularly when you're a sort of second banana actor, which is all I ever was, you've had to make bricks without straw for so many years, and you've been given so many dud scripts to try and breathe life into, that you have a kind of instinct for what is sayable and what isn't sayable, and what needs fixing, what you can just about get away with. And I think all of that stuff comes into play when you're actually writing for other people. Sharpe really, for me, was one of my first experiences of being in what felt like a club, because of all the dramas at the beginning, although neither Tim or I were particularly big parts in it, but nevertheless, we were much more involved than you would normally be playing a role of that size.
Yeah.
So I've always remembered it with some affection. And I sort of got interested in Sharpe. And then I went on, because we know Bernard Cornwell, we've seen him a bit in Charleston since then, where he lives half the year, I think. And so I got kind of involved, to the extent, I may say, of today bringing the sword that my own ancestor was presented only 12 years later at the Battle of Navarino in 1827.
Marcus is marginally excited right now.
And he started out serving under Nelson, so he was in all this, and he was Admiral Sir Thomas Fellowes. So it's quite nice to be reminded that all of us had links with this period, and that we are only the descendants of our forebears, all of us. And I quite like being reminded of that.
There was a great question from Rob Howlett, who said as well, is there any of the episodes that you watch, the Sharpe ones, where you think, I'd like to rewrite that and I'd do this and this? And have you ever thought about one that you would attack with your pen?
I've always wanted to write something about the Prince Regent, because I find him a kind of tragicomic character who's never really been mined for anything but ridicule. And I think there is a slightly more interesting story to be told about him. But no, I mean, mainly when I watch myself on screen, I have to cover my face with two hands until I've gone off. So it's not tremendously informative. I only really enjoy watching the episodes I'm not in.
I have to say as well that I have written a book and I'm researching more on George V. And usually when you go to archives, you're always looking over your shoulder at what the person next to you's got, because it might be more interesting than what you've got. It's like the grass is always greener. That is the one where it's never the case for me at Windsor Castle, is when I see the poor people with the Prince Regent's boxes of letters and just think, rather you than me.
I know, but it's interesting. I mean, he and Charles I made the two greatest contributions to the royal collection. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt about that. And, you know, there are plenty of kings who've done less than he did, but he just did have what Nanny would call an unfortunate personality. Yeah. He's been paying for it ever since, really.
Yeah, I think they generally, they had some girls come in who their sole purpose was to catalogue his letters. And in the end, he was so unbearable a personality that they would do that 3 days a week, and then they'd break it up for them and give them other tasks, because spending 5 days a week, every week with Prinny was just too much. Yeah.
He was such a strange, just to, as I always do, put it onto Wellington. But Wellington and him didn't really get on, but he was kind of asked to give him the guided tour of the battlefield of Waterloo, and you can't really refuse the Prince Regent. And he gave it, and apparently the Prince Regent was absolutely cold, nonchalant, didn't really care. Then they went to go see where they kind of reportedly buried Uxbridge's leg. Uxbridge survives, and the Prince Regent breaks down in tears at seeing the burial of a leg, an amputated leg. So he did care, but in only about certain people or certain parts, or maybe it was just the aristocracy, or I don't quite know. But it was a really strange anecdote.
A leg fetish of some
certain part is a slightly strange phrase to use in connection with that story. But I think the nicest bit about the Prince Regent and Waterloo was that he came to believe he'd been there. And Wellington didn't completely squash it. He sort of went along with it because it was easier and more polite to do so. And I love that. He forgot that George II was the last king of England who went on a battlefield. And he thought he'd been there. Of course, we certainly would have lost if he had been. So it's just as well that he wasn't.
But William of Orange, it was bad enough.
Yeah, well, that was my bloke. Yeah, that was
William
my
of
bloke.
Orange, of course.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, did he lead his troops, though? He fought like Billio and he hated Louis XIV, but was he actually on the battlefield?
Who, William?
William, yes, he was, wasn't he?
I just know that
I don't think he
George
was.
II was the last, apart from, because George V obviously potters around, but I think the last one to lead troops is George II, isn't it?
George II, yes, at Dettingen or whatever it was.
Yes. But I know you're right, it would be nice to see the Prince Regent done, if nothing else, than to give it like the similar kind of treatment that Edward VIII got in the first season of The Crown, where you were just like, oh, I'm cringing so much watching this, but you've got him nailed. And then I think, yes, there was one other question about writing for you. Oh no, I like this one better actually. First of all, they want to know, did you prefer playing Major Dunnet or Prince Regent? I think we know the answer to that. But if you could have played a third character, what would you have played?
Oh, that's too hard for me, I think. I mean, the answer to the first, as we've said, was that Major Dunnet was the better job and the Prince Regent was the better part. So they were quite equally divided. But I don't know. In those days, I just used to count my lines. I don't remember having much more of a sort of commitment to it than that. And also looking to how near the end you were. That was the thing. You would go to the end and then count backwards to see if you were still around. that was my highly intellectual assessment of my roles at that time.
Yeah, it's quite funny because we get questions about characterization and how did you put yourself into the mindset of Major Dunnet, and the answer is you were Major Dunnet for over a year because of everything that went on.
I played leading roles that took much less time. But I think with all of this, I mean, I did know quite a lot about the Napoleonic Wars. I think that was helpful because the kind of attitude of everyone and the whole business of life going on in Brussels and the Duchess of Richmond's ball and all of that stuff. These were themes that came up later in my work, in fact. And I had the ball in my version of Vanity Fair, but then also in my version of Belgravia. When they both, in both of those, everyone charged off to Waterloo. So I was quite steeped in the whole thing. And that, I think, was quite helpful, really.
I will ask you this last writing question because it is very good. So we all know that Bernard Cornwell is doing another Sharpe novel. Would you, if they asked you, would you do the script?
I don't know. I tend to keep these things separate, really. I mean, I'm now working on a series which is being shot in America. Under COVID restrictions, which is quite a performance, I can tell you.
Is that the Gilded Age?
That's Gilded Age.
Yeah.
And if that's, if they do a second one, then I'd be engulfed by it. But I mean, I love Bernard and I hope it's a great success and I'm sure it will be.
Look, just to say, of course, we did have Nicholas Rowe on, who played Wellington in your series. So there was an extra Wellington on.
He was in Dr. Thorne for me. Very good actor, actually. And then he played Wellington for us later, yes, in Belgravia.
I absolutely enjoyed watching it.
Natasha said she loved Belgravia and enjoyed watching it.
Oh, good. How nice of you. Thank you.
We've had lots of questions as well, because we have obviously got the Chosen Men with us, or most of them. This episode really did, we've discussed it a little bit before, it really did, you got to add background, didn't you? And sort of grow your characters beyond a couple of lines. Paul, your obviously famous answer for everything is army. Someone wants to know whose idea was the bandana headscarf.
Mine.
Was it a good thing, by the way? Was it just more comfortable with the silly shakos on?
What's that, Marcus?
Did you just find it more comfortable to wear the other hats with the bandana, or did you just think style?
No, I just thought it looked cool.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does.
Best reason.
Completely that reason. And I thought, well, we're all going to be wearing the same uniform, and that will be something that can be my thing. And I sort of had this notion that he was almost like a sort of Cherokee or something. You know, that was the vibe I was sort of, I felt he sort of had this kind of like Native American scout kind of vibe about him.
Yes. Very cool.
It sort of tied in with that a little bit, I think. Yeah.
It's very gritty, the episode, isn't it? Lyndon, is it the most grueling one that you filmed?
Probably because we did it twice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, because it was also first time for everybody out there. So it was everyone was sort of getting to know everybody and trying to get used to the situations, which weren't easy. But then doing it all over again, going back out with Sean and redoing what we'd done before, was difficult.
We've got lots of questions, Jason, from Glyn, Rebecca, Christopher, all wanting to know how genuine you were in terms of your interest in the classics and poetry. How much of it did you read to get into character?
I must say I was more of a classics play and theatre reader at that point, and I really loved books about behind the scenes, funnily enough. Story of Led Zeppelin's tour of this, or Tottenham Hotspur's glory years in '61. I would love those.
About 3 pages long, right?
No, it's a really good book, actually. The Glory Years, I think it's called. So I wasn't. My father is a poet, by the way, or was. So really, I should have been into poetry. So I don't know, but no, I was never into poetry. I know that's one of the questions. And I had read some of the classics, but I was more of a classics theatre reader, I would say.
You mentioned the recollections of Rifleman Harris, Benjamin Harris in real life, and that is a fantastic read because there's not many. I mean, he couldn't read all right like your character could, but it's so interesting to see a first-hand perspective from a private soldier, born and raised in Dorset, has a terrible experience in the Peninsular War where men are killed next to him, goes to Flanders, gets malaria, and then is recollected in I think it's Portsmouth in a hospital, and then in Dorchester Hospital. I love it because it's where I was born. But it's really nice to get a first-hand account of somebody who's a bit more normal. He's not going to make an account of himself, and it adds a lot more to it to go, actually, yeah, there's a little link between a real-life character who's normal as such.
Where were you born?
Dorchester.
Because I live just outside Dorchester. I'm sitting in West Stafford right now.
Oh, you're just down the road from my parents, then.
Yeah. Isn't that funny?
If you could stop in and wave at the front door, he hasn't seen him in about a year now.
But actually, I owe a lot to the recollections of Rifleman Harris because I read that and I said, why don't I recall everything I'm going to do on Sharpe, just in case Sharpe is one day something big? So that's why I did a diary. That's why I did a photo journal, and then later on I did a video diary. So, yay, Rifleman Harris.
Yeah.
You should do a book, Jason.
So, guys, I have to explain to Tim and Julian, this is a game. So, Jason has written a book, and there are some listeners that play Salkey Bingo. Every time he mentions the book, they drink. So, we make a joke out of mentioning it as much as possible. And actually, Hugh Ross has got fabulous at making him mention the book about 40 times in every episode, hasn't he?
We'll just get one out now. It's From Crimea with Love, published by Unbound, and you can pre-order now, coming out in July this year.
Oh, we've got a release date now, haven't we? It's moving forward.
Yes. Unfortunately, on the 7th of July.
So that's a pint being drunk just then. So now we just have to go Jason's book, Jason's book, Jason's book, and then they'll
Yeah.
be completely
Yeah.
paralytic within half a minute.
Exactly. By the end of the show, presumably they're carried upstairs drunk.
Yeah,
That's
Jason's
the
book.
idea.
That's what
That's
we
it.
aim for in each episode, just to get back at them, basically.
There was a plot twist at the end of, not the last one, I think the one before, where Lyndon revealed that he's writing a book. I think that's worth an extra drink.
Yeah.
That's just
Lyndon's
neck
book.
it. You two with your swords, you
Oh,
nerd.
good, yes. I was going-
I'm going to go and get my great uncle's sword.
Absolutely. I think we need a sword off.
What have you got, Zach? The 1803 flank officers.
The one that I was complaining to you the other day has somehow managed to
Can you
corrode.
see your sword unsheathed? I'd just like to see Julian's sword, the actual sword, and not in the scabbard.
Oh,
I get my bayonet fucking-
Marcus is so glad you asked that, and Zach.
You'd like him to take it out, basically.
it's quite interesting, actually, because it's a blade that was only fashionable for a very short time.
Oh, it's in good condition.
Very good condition.
It has this sort of
Oh, wow.
funny widening at the bottom here.
That would be for strength.
So that's that.
Thank you. Mearsy, just to catch you up, that sword was from what year, did you say, Julian?
Well, it was, I don't know what year this actual sword is, but it was presented to my ancestor by William IV when he was still Duke of Clarence in 1827.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Tim,
That's
show us
been
your
fun.
sword.
Yeah.
Get it out. Get it
So-
out.
Well, that's the one that I've
Sort
had
it out.
in the family for a long time. And then the Coldstream Guards got hold of me last year and said they had one of my Uncle Arthur's sword. That they said that belongs to you. So I went and collected it from the regimental headquarters and carried it on the tube, which was probably illegal. But it's a nice Wilkinson sword.
Do a screen cap, Alex, with our swords out.
Swords.
Hold on a sec. I'm going to get my Swiss Army knife out.
I seriously do have. I have a nail
Got a
file.
great knife.
Oh, nice old bulbs.
Hang on.
Brilliant.
Hang on.
David T couldn't make it, Marcus. He was going to. I think he's working, isn't he?
Kerry Shell, yes. Kerry Shell got a job on an audiobook. And unfortunately, David Troughton has had COVID, but he's getting over it.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I texted Kerry to say, because ever since, this is the funny thing about me and Kerry Shale, is ever since doing Sharpe, we only speak to each other with Russian accent. So when we email each other, he is Boris and I am Sergei. And this has remained the case ever since. So I texted him to say, clearly you're just trying to get out of it, this excuse about doing audiobooks. He said, no, I'm actually, it's spelled with an E, actually doing an audiobook on the weekend.
The wonderful Michael Mears has joined us. Hello.
Hello, nice to be here. Sorry, I'm late.
No, it's a return of the Triple M. Better late than
I'm
never.
working on that. I'm trying to get it down to a double.
And happy birthday, Michael. Michael was had a birthday last week.
Happy
Yes.
birthday.
Will you still need me? Will you still feed me?
Hey.
Now I'm 64. I'm sure.
Absolutely.
How about that?
Don't look a day over 29.
Tim Bentinck, that all started you and Kerry over the Risk board, didn't it? Playing Risk.
It absolutely did, yeah. And I was saying earlier before you came, there's a chapter, I was asked to write an autobiography, and there's a chapter about Sharpe's rifle in it, which features the Risk board, where Jason and we needed a large table,
Yes.
and it wasn't big enough in our room. So we went downstairs into the foyer where these two Russian guards were, basically said to them, we needed to play a game of international conflict, a game which you appear to have recently lost.
That table reminds me of the moment when we all decided that the food was simply too awful to bear, and the someone or other, one of the producers, told the kitchen they must make better food. And as a result, they didn't know what to do. And there was a choice of 4 first courses and 4 main courses. And I wasn't working the next day, and nor was someone else, I forget who. And the 2 of us came down for lunch. And all they could think to do was to bring us both all 8 dishes. So we had a table like that with 16 plates of disgusting food. It was all sort of cat meat with tortoise sauce, you know, and completely inedible. Cottages pie was one of my favorites that they were always trying to unload on us. And I remember they didn't know how to make it better, which I suppose would be different now.
I want to ask Zach, because Zach is a specialist in military discipline in the Peninsular Wars. How much would these scallywags in Sharpe's band of merry chosen men have actually got away with in real life? Is it realistic, the stuff they get up to?
Ironically, they'd have got away with pretty much all of it. Because everybody has this kind of perception that because the British Army at the time was very heavy in its use of flogging, 1,500 lashes could legally be given to somebody who was stealing or murder, those kinds of crimes. In theory, they might have been punished quite severely, but the reality was that officers knew that just like the crew was starving and really struggling and this is why you had kind of the Dimagee bacon riot, if I remember it rightly. Just as the crew were kind of going through those issues, actually the men on the ground during the Peninsular War were really struggling in terms of rations. So a lot of the stealing that they did ended up coming from the fact that they were going off in search of food in order to keep going. So as an officer, you didn't really want to punish your men for the fact that they were starving. So they turned a blind eye to a lot of it. So yeah, they'd have got away with the vast majority of it. That's
good to know. Guys, you've been vindicated. Look at something.
Can I read you a little tiny, very small account of us getting there, the outward bound trip, the Pathfinder trip?
Yeah. So is this? I've heard rumours of a slightly hedonistic flight to Ukraine.
I've seen a photo with involved a bottle of vodka.
Yeah.
I don't tell the truth. This isn't exactly what happened, but because the thing is, I did actually keep a journal at the time. So one of the, it's quite nice when you're writing an autobiography to be able to go back to stuff you'd actually written at the time, because it's not just memories. Oh, there you go. Right. So the British Airways flight to Moscow was fairly uneventful. Then we changed to a different airport and a Russian charter plane. The Ilyushin, parked on the far side of the Moscow air base of the Russian Air Force, smelled strongly of damp. The hold wasn't big enough to fit all the camera equipment, so they simply piled it up in the aisle and across the seats at the back. This created a kind of private cabinette that contained assorted newly met chosen men and other ne'er-do-wells. The Pathfinders of episode 1 were on their way. When I say on their way, it took about an hour to get the engines started. And when they finally caught, huge clouds of smoke belched from the jets under the wings, and the whole plane shook violently. Vodka seemed the only sensible option, and the cabinette turned into the bar. 3 hours later, we started our descent into Simferopol. Within 30 seconds, we had landed. Apparently, the captain was a military jet pilot whose technique for landing a plane was almost identical to that for vertical dive bombing. Jason Salkey, Trooper Harris, used the plummeting plane to demonstrate his skateboarding skills. The rest of us curled up and prayed, even the atheists.
It sounds like pretty standard opening to a trip to the Crimea with Sharpe. What I love is those pictures on that plane. The first time we started seeing those, we couldn't work out whether that was mould and decay or a pattern on the walls.
That was mould.
Yeah.
I remember best about our hotel in Simferopol was I went into my very poky room and there was an enormous television which took up about half the floor space. So I thought, and I tried to turn it on, nothing. And then I looked behind and the wire had no plug. It was just stapled to the skirting board. And I said, when next time someone came up from the hotel, I said, what is the point of this? It can't work. It's just stapled to the wall. And she said, yes, but that's because when you go back, if you're a Russian, people say, was there a television in your room?
Yes.
About if you wanted to make a phone call home. Do you remember that, Jace?
Yeah.
And you sort of had to queue, didn't you, to get to the phone, and then you had to dial a number to connect to an operator, and it was like sort of, and then I can't remember. It was like a massively convoluted system.
You had to book the call. You had to book the call, and then you were called back then you left the queue, and then you were called back when you would be able to be put through. It was a right old palaver the first year. Things improved in the second year when we had direct dial, but that still meant queuing and then banging on the door. You've had half an hour, mate, and all of that.
Yeah.
I remember very well queuing, and Sean was in the booth, and he was just sitting there on the phone, and he wasn't talking, and he was there for about 3/4 of an hour, and it turned out that his mum had put the telephone next to the radio, and he was listening to Sheffield United.
Yeah, we've heard many times that apparently that was every Saturday.
Oh, was it?
And that nobody else was allowed anywhere near the phone.
Oh, right.
For that period of time.
To remember how recent mobiles are. I remember we got our first mobile in the sort of mid-90s because there'd been a horrible incident of some young woman who was attacked on the motorway and killed. And because she'd been walking to one of those telephones that they had sort of every half mile or every mile, I forget now. And we got a mobile. But even then it seemed kind of wild and only for sort of in extremis moments. And it wasn't really until the end of the 90s that they'd become at all normal. And now, none of us, it'd be like being without your thumbs. It's extraordinary how quickly that happened, really.
Well, also email. I mean, we couldn't even, that first year we were doing Sharpe, we couldn't even email our, relatives. And
letters from home, I remember them well.
Yeah.
My dad used to send me cuttings from the newspapers every Sunday, like football matches, West Ham, commentating on the West Ham and theatre reviews and all that stuff and interesting bits of news. And I get a big wedge envelope, with all the latest stuff. But yeah, strange day.
That was a real lifeline, wasn't it, when we got the newspapers from home?
Yeah.
But I was going to say, I was the first person to have a mobile on Sharpe in 1996, the 4 series.
Wow.
And I remember we were in Turkey, and I went to Yalta for the weekend because it was quite close. And I left my mobile phone with Sean because he didn't have a mobile, and came back to the most horrendous bill, which of course we had to share. But yeah, even Sean Bean didn't have a mobile back in 1996.
You said you had to share the bill.
Well, no. So I was going to Yalta for the weekend to visit Natasha because Natasha and Daniel were there from Turkey, which is close, and there was no signal in Yalta, so there's no point taking it. So I left the phone in Turkey with Sean, even though he had a hotel phone and a suite. He still would, because it was.
I get it, but I'm saying, did he make you pay half of his bill? Is what I'm saying.
No, I got the itemized bill and I showed everyone. Because in fact everyone was using it because no one had a phone. So
we have got a brilliant question as well for Julian, worded several different ways from several different people. How did it come about that you ended up one of the rare people with the 2 roles? Did you ask to go back as the Prince of Regent, or did they come find you?
No, I didn't ask to go back, but the moment they'd suggested it, I was very glad to do it. I was slightly worried that they would make me look sufficiently different, but I needn't have, because when I first saw the wig, I realized it was like a sort of down-market Elvis Presley lookalike show. And when I was actually having it fitted in the trailer, people were coming on and pushing in to see it and saying, "Oh my God," as they looked at me in this terrible wig. So I knew it was a safe second character. And I remember after watching one scene, who was the girl playing the wicked countess of that week? It was Caroline Langridge. And she, as I walked off the set, when they said right on to the next scene, I walked off the set and I walked past her and she said, "Very brave."
Terrifying when people say that was a very brave performance.
Oh my God! You've really made a fool of yourself.
Christ, what have I done?
But regarding Dunnett, Lawrence Edward Richard wants to know: do you think Dunnett would have come around to Sharpe if they'd continued serving together?
Well, I don't think he would have seen Sharpe's potential, because I think you need an event to shake things up, to make everyone not see the people around them as they had seen them previously. And we know that in our own lives. If you're not seen as a leading player and you finally get your break because someone's ill or something's happened or something's gone wrong on location and you get a chance, then people can see you in a different light, but they wouldn't have done that themselves unmotivated. And in private life, it's like wanting someone to see you as a romantic possibility when all they've ever seen you is as a mate. It takes some kind of event to shake that off. And in the case of Sharpe, I don't think Dunnett would have seen Sharpe's potential. I mean, if he'd been wounded and Sharpe had taken over, then maybe that would have been a sufficient event, but something had to happen.
I'm just looking because I've forgotten his name, but we had him on because he was in Sharpe, Jason, and he's also in Hornblower, and we were joking, is his name John or Nick? His role is always
Nick Jones. Nick Jones.
Nick Jones always dies to make room for the lead character. It's in Hornblower and it's in Sharpe as well, isn't it?
He just gets shot in the leg and a silver dollar saves him. That's in that scene. He gets shot and hits the dollar.
Also, as well, Christopher Sorensen wanted to ask Tim, for a character we barely get time to love, is there anything that ended up on the cutting room floor that you put loads of effort into, or that would have shown us another side or more of your character, but it didn't make it in?
Yeah, I saw that. I don't think there was actually. It was quite unusually. I think everything that we shot, got used, apart obviously from the McGann. I have a feeling that my death with McGann was better than my death with Shaun. I always sort of felt that I'd done it better. And I do remember walking towards, when we were about to shoot it with Paul, and walking along the road, and he was there was Paul McGann, very famous actor, and I said to him, this is my first death. I said, have you ever died? And Paul went, oh, loads of time. I remember thinking, oh God, a seasoned dyer here, and I'm a virgin dyer. Anyway, so no, I don't think, as far as I know, there wasn't anything left on the cutting room floor.
Jason, a quick kind of techie question here, because I'm thinking back to Gold, where you all shot the script, and then you had to do a different script because of kind of the legal issues and paying everybody twice. Why didn't that happen for Rifles?
Because they'd shot, they decided they'd done they'd shot no scenes from Gold at all, whereas we'd done a couple of scenes each from Eagle and Rifles, and they decided that was the one they were going to cut loose. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's strange, yeah. A bummer.
Well, this is a good one for the Chosen Men, because you did spend a lot of time in each other's pockets. Helen Meyer would like to know, there are any awkward moments where you all got up each other's nose or had a row? The way Paul's laughing. No, of course not. Any handbags?
Handbags? Yeah, I think there was. I remember once I sort of... I asked Darrow maybe if he would perhaps turn his World Service radio down.
Brave man.
Which was a fairly constant soundtrack in our tent. And I'm not really a sports person myself, but he was listening to that a lot. And I think the phrase is lost his shit.
I am quite devastated that I don't think you've got the footage anymore, that fight scene between Sharpe and Darrow, that the version of him fighting Paul, because their size difference. I'd love to have seen that. He's like treble the size of Paul McGann.
Yeah.
What is Darrow doing now? Does anyone know? Is he well? Is everything going well?
He's very active on Facebook lately. He had lots of memes, so he must be well.
But is he working in television and films?
Yes, apparently he not that long ago he did an episode of Vera.
Oh right.
I mean, if that means anything. Okay, so by the time we got to this scene, Paul had knackered his knee already.
That's right. Yeah.
So they had to have a double for Paul, who looked really like Paul. It was amazing. Do you remember him?
Uncanny, wasn't it?
Yeah. And so and they also had a stunt double for Darrow. I'm going to find them in the pictures in 1 second. So a lot of the takes were they motion to punch, cut, and then they put in Darrow's double or Paul's double, and from there. Whereas 4 months later, the fight between Sean and Dara in Portugal, with not a stunt double in sight, with Greg Powell as a stunt coordinator, that was the most vicious fight I've ever witnessed in a movie, both on screen and while rehearsing it.
Wow.
So, it was incredible, the violence and the punches and the almost hits that happen, and it was amazing. So yeah, the contrast between those two scenes, the one we see here and what we shot later on, is just marked, incredible. In fact, behind Dima at the back there, I think that's the dying room, Tim. Behind that straw stuff, that's where you died.
Oh, right.
In that little room back there, yeah.
Oh, God, yeah.
By the way, apropos of Paul and Dara, I saw a film the other day which I hadn't seen for the best part of 30 years. Well, I think I last saw it before I was ever on Sharpe. Was with Nail and I. And of course, Dara threatens Paul famously in the Camden pub, calling him a perfumed ponce. Oh, yes. God, Dara, and there's Paul.
Set that day.
Jason, a lot of the fans always ask about the footage, but I think most of the footage is normally destroyed afterwards, isn't it? So the stills that you've got in the video diaries, is that going to be the only images we've got as Paul as Sharpe? Is it?
Well, Paul mentioned that someone pulled footage out, moving footage out when they started getting into the legal fight. Someone had footage, didn't they?
Yes, that was me. I went. If we get to the question, what's your biggest regret on Sharpe ever? This will probably be it.
Okay, Jason, what's your biggest regret on Sharpe ever?
By the way, this is Paul McGann's stunt double. That's pretty good, huh?
Yeah.
Not as pretty as Paul.
No, one was. Sorry, it's Natasha needs to see one second.
Paul much pretty.
Oh Christ, sorry. I don't know where the picture's gone now. I'm sorry. Anyway, right. So I was called into. I was called by Paul McGann just before the 5th year, and he said, "Can you go in and speak to a lawyer who is Natasha, who is suing Malcolm Craddock, Sharpe film, blah 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 blah." And I said, "Yeah, what the hell? I can go in and talk. It's fine. And in the meeting, we talked about what happened, etc., and he showed me some of the grainy rushes from when Paul hurt his knee the 3rd time. Remember in Eagle where we're climbing up that hill and through that thick gorse bush?
Oh yes.
And we were made to climb up to the location before shooting, and basically Paul hurt his knee on that climb up, and then we found that later we could have been driven up to the spot where the camera is. Anyway, so that's why did I mention that? Yeah, so I saw that footage in a grainy Super 16, wherever it was, on the screen. But what happens? They were shooting on Super 16mm film, and they wouldn't develop everything anyway. So that's why there wouldn't be a lot of Paul McGann footage around. So yes, I have seen a bit of footage, and also Paul Trussell has a bit of video footage with Paul McGann as Sharpe as well.
What's your biggest regret?
Biggest regret, yes. So thank you, Natasha.
I love it. Natasha's way of saying, get to the point, darling.
Yes, thank you. I'm so good. So years on Sharpe have destroyed my brain, obviously. So after the meeting with the lawyer, I thought it was all over, and I was about to go. He said, "Oh, by the way, can you just sign this?" And I was like, "Oh, well, okay, well, yeah, what the hell?" Sign on the. A week later, I got a letter from Her Majesty's, whatever it was, a seriously scary-looking letter saying you have been summoned to be a witness in court against Malcolm Craddock, Sharpe film, Mears Sutherland, la 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 la. And a few weeks later, I came to negotiate my final year contract with Sharpe, Sharpe's Waterloo, Sharpe's Revenge, Sharpe's Justice. And I was only in Sharpe's Waterloo. I was cut out of 2 episodes.
Oh, mate.
They claim it wasn't because of that, but I have a feeling it was. So that's one of my biggest regrets on Sharpe. Although I was helping Paul McGann, I wanted to help Paul McGann. That was my intention. So I wasn't thinking about myself at all. And that's probably one of my biggest regrets.
I've gone back and watched it, Jason, after you told me that. And I think there's 2 points in Sharpe's Waterloo where you're asked a question, once by Sean and once by John Tams. And I think both times your script response is to smile and laugh. So they actually, it's noticeable that there's no lines given to you. And now you've said it, I've started to pick up on it in that episode.
Well, no, I was always going to be in Waterloo. No, that's just my enigmatic acting. What's your first name?
Too good. Didn't need lines.
But
What happened to the case? Who
right,
won?
okay, good question. Right, so about before we left for Turkey at that point, they settled out of court.
Oh, okay.
So I never had to go into anything, but I was identified as an insurrectionist. So that's my biggest regret. Although I wanted to help Paul, but I didn't know. I'm stupid. I should have known if I'm signing something, I shouldn't have signed something. It was my fault.
So Paul, speaking of regrets, because we've had the usual couple of questions that come in about you leaving, but I love this one. I noticed on Facebook you're now an accomplished artist, which we mentioned at the beginning, and that you've done a Harris portrait that makes Jason look a lot more handsome than he is. Were you doing art back then?
No, I don't think I was. Oh, there we go. There he is again. That's my.
You weren't doing art back then, I can tell you. You weren't. And thank you for making me look handsome.
Yeah, but did you regret leaving? Because apparently you give a rather enigmatic response when anyone asks you, and just say, "Not now, Jezebel." If you could go back, would you have stayed around longer?
Well, I mean, I suppose. I mean, I was very, very ambitious back in those days, you know, and I'd been offered a part in a Mike Leigh play the following year, and I'd always wanted to work with Mike Leigh. Well, I'd worked with him a little bit before, and he'd always sort of said, "Oh, you know, one day we'll do something, you know, bigger together," which, you know, it's quite something really coming from him. And I had the opportunity of doing this play. I was offered it, and at that time there was no certainty that there was going to be any more Sharpes, you see. So I did the play. I mean, but then when it went on year after year, and I sort of thought, oh, that would have been nice, you know, to have been going off and doing Sharpe every year. I would have liked to have done that, but I didn't regret it really. I don't regret it because I got to work with Mike Leigh for quite a long time, and on something that was devised with him, and in a lot of ways, you know, it was acting-wise, it was sort of the making of me really, because of the work working with him, and he's just so good. If you're a young actor and you know, he's just very good at bringing out the best in you and making you think about things that you hadn't thought about before. And so I certainly don't regret it, because, as I say, I had that sort of several month period of working with Mike. So, but yeah, I miss going back out, and you know, obviously I was really, really good mates with Jason and good mates with Lyndon and other people, you know, Tim and Julian and stuff. But yeah, I regretted that, but. And I regretted the money. I'm not going to lie. I regretted the money. The yearly little bit of splodge of money would have been very, very nice. But there you go.
Did you, in your head, ever construct like where you think Tongue went and what he did? Someone asked.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, you know, he was a kind of gypsy-like character, wasn't he? So I know that I've discussed this a bit with Jason, and Jason has the idea, I think, that he maybe goes off and becomes an artist, which I like.
Julian, what about you?
Well, I mean, I think I was taken on to play a part, and I played it. And when I took it, I thought it meant a week in Simferopol. In fact, it meant a year out of my life. But and obviously because of that, I got more interested and more involved in everything, and I knew all the people better and everything. But, you know, when you're an actor, you're always on the move. It's a kind of gypsy life, and you can't really fight that. I mean, you're taken on for as long as you're taken on. You sign on for a play, it runs a week, it runs 2 years. You never know what's coming next. And so I think when I was acting, you just sort of stay loose. You get to the end of the job. If you've enjoyed it, you're sorry. You go home, you wonder what's coming next. I don't think I ever made it much more complicated than that, really.
There's a brilliant question for Julian that I've just spotted scrolling through here from Mark Williams. As an actor and a writer, how much do you get the hump when an actor changes the scripted line?
I get an enormous hump almost immediately. I mean, very occasionally they come up with something better, but they usually change them simply to make them their own, so that they can feel that it belongs to them. Americans do it more than the English, actually. And what is annoying is that a lot of, all humor is as much to do with rhythm as content. So if you put in one word too many, the line ceases to be funny, even though the meaning hasn't changed. And that's when it gets annoying. But on the other hand, one mustn't be too precious, you know. We're all just trying to get through it. And I think there is a moment where if their performance generally is working and they're putting over something that's making the show good, then I think you just have to suck the rest of it up, to be honest.
It's a good question, though, isn't it? Something that you've slaved over, and then an actor comes along and decides they can do better on the spot. There must be occasions where you want to throttle them.
You get one. You'll be making a series, and the others will very occasionally say, "Oh, is it okay if I say this instead of that?" And it's fine. But there's always one who wants to change every line, and by the end, you just want to take out a contract.
Who? I want to know who. Name names.
No names, no Castro.
Yes, maybe when we turn the recording off at the end.
Yeah. I will say there was one writer on Sharpe that Tom was absolutely verboten that we change any lines, and that was Charles Wood, who wrote Regiment, Waterloo, and Company. And if you wanted to change a line, that Tom was like, no way, no way, no way, because it was kind of written as a sort of poetry, the way Charles Wood wrote. Even though he wrote terrible lines for us, of course. What you say, Lyndon?
So we've never had any like Company.
Yeah, exactly. Charles Wood barely gave us anyway. So yeah, that was the one writer that Tom was really precious about, is Charles Wood.
But also, what they create is they create endless, needless repeats. So they change the line and use the word although at the end of this scene. And in the next scene, which is shot 4.5 weeks later, the first line starts with although. And that didn't happen in the original script. And you just think, why can't you just read your scene in context? But they never do. Anyway, I'm giving myself away here. I shall now gather up my skirt and go back to my chair.
No, it's cathartic. I think just let it all out, Julian. It's fine.
While we got Julian, Natasha asks, when was the first time you wrote a screenplay, and what was it?
The very first time I wrote a screenplay was when I was making a really terrible series of Sherlock Holmes in Warsaw playing London, and it was for an American producer called Sheldon Reynolds and his wife, who later became famous for being the girlfriend of Klaus von Bülow and getting him off, Andrea Reynolds. She and I became very friendly, and she got her husband to let me write a script, and they shot it. And although nobody watched this series, that was the first time I'd ever done it. But then I didn't do it again until I was producing a show for children's television on BBC, and we'd spent the money, we'd got the scripts written, and they didn't work. And by then, all the money had gone, and we needed someone to rewrite it for nothing. And of course, you know, I remember the BBC producer saying, "What fool would do that?" Well, I was that fool. And then we made that show, and it did pretty well. And then I was commissioned to do Little Lord Fauntleroy, and then we were off.
I remember Little Lord Fauntleroy being the first thing I remember you writing.
Yeah, and then that won an international Emmy, and suddenly I'd become this kind of writer, which crept up on me. I mean, before then, I thought my plan B would be to be a producer. But anyway, you know, we never know what's coming.
I know. This room is full of writers who haven't got 2 pennies to rub together, historians. So that's a sad story for us. There is a question here from Alan Hunt, but I wonder if that is actually just Zach pretending to be someone else. Would you consider writing a Napoleonic film that shows a soldier's life, like The Retreat to Corunna? And then I think part B is probably, will you use Zach as your historical advisor? I think it is a genuine question from someone called Alan.
I love the period, actually. I mean, I've been in the business long enough never to say never. And when I get to a period when I have no work lined up, then who knows what comes next. I try not to book in too much so that you know what's going to be the next 10 years, because I think that's rather dull. I think after a bit you should not commit and just try to keep it open. But a series, of course, is a bit more of a challenge because you're expected to commit, in America, to sort of 5 or 7 years. Whether or not it runs that long, you have to make that commitment at the beginning. So it's difficult sometimes to see over the top of it.
A lot of us have been saying for a while that we'd like to see another Hornblower or a Master and Commander or something in that vein, haven't we?
No, there's been no proper sale film since Master and Commander, and that was at the very beginning of CGI. Marcus is quite anti-CGI, but no one's done it sort of since, well, it's like nearly 20 years now since someone put a huge budget into a naval for what is a hugely popular period as well.
So that's because part of the
media the other day saying he wouldn't be adverse to doing another Master and Commander.
Yeah,
but it's the Pirates of the Caribbean
cast it then.
Yeah, Johan Griffith, of course, said that he would, because Hornblower, the stories go on and on, don't they?
Yeah.
It's difficult in the present climate because there are no decent parts for women, and they're just tacked on. They're artificially shoehorned into these all-male plots, and that just doesn't fit with the way things are blowing at the moment.
That's true.
Well, do you know what I've been sketching for ages now? The idea of a 10-part thing from Emma Hamilton's perspective, but it's, you know, when you've got a pile of projects that you really would be great.
I wrote a film about Emma Hamilton, and that is a wonderful story. And that whole triangle of Hamilton, Emma, and Nelson is very moving, actually. A rather extraordinary film, and of course, it's a different film from the one that was made in the 40s, because Hamilton was essentially in love with Nelson, as was Emma, which was something they wouldn't have touched with a barge pole back then.
Yeah.
In fact, it could be a very, very interesting film now. But, you know, as always, it's one of those frightfully good projects that you have in your bottom drawer, waiting for the right producer.
And you do know, of course, that I had to do this for a Sonnet Lumiere with Tim Hardy, that Nelson had a very strong Norfolk accent. And I played Nelson. And because I had associations with Norfolk, I did it with the Norfolk accent, as he did have. And I was attacked for saying that you're taking the piss out of Nelson, because clearly Nelson spoke like that, which he didn't.
I think he did.
I know, but sometimes the truth doesn't play as well as a lie.
Especially if all the money coming in is American.
Yeah.
They don't want to hear a Norfolk accent.
They don't want to hear Norfolk accent, not Horatio's mouth.
No, it's quite funny watching an American try and make out someone with a Geordie accent.
Anything.
Right, because by that period, the standard London accent, which was essentially the accent of the court, had become, even earlier than that, had become standard. And Walpole, for instance, was teased for his Norfolk accent in Parliament. And the idea that they went on with regional accents much later, Nelson was mercilessly teased for his. And certainly by, a little later in the century, people did everything they could to lose them.
Yeah.
I think it would be great as well, whatever was made, like with Nelson in it now, if he was like the tiny little guy he was in real life as well. If you've ever seen his uniform.
Tiny bloke with a Norfolk accent doesn't fit.
5'6", skinny little bloke with a Norfolk accent.
No.
It's
not the Americans could just cast Tom Cruise.
I've got a £5 I can put into the production budget somewhere if I scrape around at the bottom of my handbag. What have we got left on our questions list? Yeah, Jason, you were asked. I think we could put this question to everybody: what their favourite scene was. I suspect Julian will say the one I'm in with lines. But yeah,
I'll do mine first, and then everyone can do this. Okay, so I've got written down here Torrey Castro, the storming of Torrey Castro, and the raising of the Gonfalon at the end. That was quite exciting. Lots of elements, a lot of buddy stuff. Me and Mickey pushing a burning carriage, and Paul Trussell getting shot in the leg, and lovely stuff. I also like the Dunit's Rifles massacre scene. That was pretty serious and wonderful. It's a whole setup. The rifles load rifles, load. We were all eating, but that's because we were hungry, and that was kind of. But I think.
And you got real food to film that
and it's
scene.
real food, yeah.
There
and
was
we've been in
actual
Crimea
chicken.
for 4 months, and this was like grilled chicken, tasty. It was like incredible. But I think my favorite has got to be Harper versus the Man in Black, where he shoots the guy with the ramrod shoots the guy and then shoots the guy with the ramrod, and then blows off the guy's hat. And then the whole scene where we're expecting Harper to get busted, and they don't bust Harper. Sharpe just says, "Fall in, Harper." And they're saying, "What do you want to give him an honor?" Asunta's character, "Do you want to give him some honor?" No, he just did. He let me fall in again. So that's probably my favorite scene. Harper versus the Man in Black.
Excellent. Paul, yours?
Well, I mean, I really liked filming that scene where he finds the guy asleep, and I creep up behind Sharpe, and I actually go, "Soldier, who goes there?" Actually, there is a slightly humorous bit of that, which is you see me, I go, "Soldier, who goes there?" And what happened was the soldier wasn't there, and I went in to do some post syncing, and they said, "Oh, just watch this." And they showed me that scene, and what had happened was, if I go up behind Sean, and before I say "who goes there," for some reason, perhaps I was nervous, I just go like this with my mouth.
Oh.
I just make this bizarre like that, and I go, "Who goes there?" And I said, "God, that looks really weird." And they were like, "Can you think of maybe something you might say, And I said, "Well, how about soldier?" And they went, "All right, let's try it." And they went, "Soldier." So I said soldier in all these different ways, and these blokes really cleverly sort of lined it up with my sort of
I'm going to wind it through and watch that.
"I hate you, Butler" kind of mouth. So that soldier is a kind of post-sync thing, so that's quite fun. But no, I like that scene. I like the fact I get the drop on Sean. That was quite nice. I think I'm the first chosen man to be seen, which I suppose was nice.
First chosen man to speak.
The first one to speak. Yeah. And I like he could have had you shot, Sergeant. I like that. I mean, I know it's a bit egotistical to choose a scene with me in, but there you go.
Go for it. Own it. Lyndon.
Own it.
Do you remember any of the scenes that you were in?
I'm the egotistical as well. I think it's got to be being made a chosen man.
Yeah.
When saving Sharpe's life, I can't remember the bloke who I shot, but I just remember Sean saying to Harper, "Give him yours, Pat," and I get the little white stripe and become a chosen man, and all went downhill.
Are you guys like a little clip? This is my only experience to draw on, is doing Joseph and his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, being one of the brothers, and the fact that we were like a little mafia behind the stage because we did everything together. And were you like that, the chosen men on set?
Yeah,
they were.
Yeah.
We were
Very much so.
And can I just say, as a postscript, to that little did we all get on stuff? We did get on, really. I mean, we niggled each other tiny bits from time to time, but on the whole, we got on pretty famously, and we were in because conditions were tough. You bond with people in that situation and stuff. So yeah, no, it was. Hey, that's a great photo.
This was the last take in the Crimea. So we were like deliriously happy, and the person who took the picture couldn't hold the camera properly, but it's still a great shot.
Brilliant.
Michael, what's your favourite scene?
Well, I loved Rifles Load as well because we shot it twice. I mean, Stamford, famously, with Paul McGann, very first day of filming, and then ultimately in Portugal. Am I right, Jason?
Yes.
Portugal.
I'm not sure did we shoot our bit eating? I think we only shot the toffs eating. No, we must have shot our bit. Yeah. We must have. Yeah.
Because we had because they found the monastery in Portugal, didn't they?
Yeah.
And so one naturally think about one's own stuff. Obviously, I love my two songs, so I got to sing in Rifles, and then John Towns decided, quite rightly probably, that he should be the only one that sings in the show. But I love because John was, John helped me with gave me the first song in Rifles. And then afterwards he said to me, he so subtly put me down. It was beautiful, actually. I may have told this story before. he said, you know, you got a lovely voice, Michael. Really lovely voice. That was lovely. I said, oh, and I said, oh, thank you, John. You know, because coming from you, that's a real compliment. I said, yeah, I mean, I've always enjoyed singing, you know, and people have told me I'm a good singer. And I think he said, no, I didn't say you're a good singer. You got a lovely voice. Okay. Bless him.
Julian, what about you? Your favourite moment on set? Julian, oh, so is it your death scene with the exploding guts?
No, I love doing that scene, but thinking about watching it through the mists of time, I remember the storming at the end, thinking that they'd managed to make it look very good, given that it was a television film and not a film, which at that time was a more meaningful distinction than it is now. But, you know, the truth of the matter is, I haven't seen it for 30 years. And so, you know, my memory of it is dim, really.
And Tim?
Well, same as Julian. I mean, I love watching the whole series as much as I love reading the books. And so, but, you know, then, yeah, same thing. I mean, in terms of standout memories, it's the things that I was in. And I have to say that facing a cavalry charge like that is something that you don't train for. They don't teach you how to do it at drama school. If you'd made a decision to become a lawyer or something, you would never have got that. So, I mean, just the feeling of standing there, apparently on your own, facing up in their stirrups, leaning forward with the swords pointing towards you, screaming blue murder, and you're on your own holding the sword. That's not acting then. That's survival, and that is I might die. And so that stuck it. That's exactly stuck in my memory. A little bit of continuity, in fact, that they slashed that uniform across, and then they put the halberd back. They put the leather thing back down the front of it like that. So there's a slash underneath it, but the leather thing isn't cut.
We did have a question as well about
tiny point of continuity there for you.
Yeah, we did have a question about the makeup for those scenes as well. How much work was needed on the wounds that you received?
Oh, I think it just a lot of Kensington gore. I think really.
Can I just say on the lines something? I mean, obviously Sharpe's known for its action, but obviously the war is sad, and it reminded me of something Michael was saying on a previous podcast, that some of the nicest lines are well away from the action and the nicest scenes. I think it's in Eagle, but where you've got all the chosen men in the inn and they're talking about their backgrounds and where they all come from, and the broken down scribbler and the drunk. But I think for me, for Rifles, it's where Sean and Dara corner Michael and ask him for his picklock. It just adds so much to his character. You know, it's hard to trust a man who asks for a picklock, sir. It's really nice. It's just all these characters, these rogues, Wellington's scum of the earth, much quoted comment. It gives them so much more character and flavour that they're not just all men stood in line doing what they've got to do. They've got a bandana, and I think John Towns wears a feather, and Perkins is fresh faced and young, and there's so much to it. Yeah, picking the lock on the book cover. I don't think that's an old version of the book. It's really nice. I really like the picklock scenes. I think it adds a lot more to the characters there.
This is a cover from I was doing a convention in America, and someone had this on their table. It says Penguin there, but I don't understand how it's Penguin. It should be HarperCollins. But that's obviously the box with all the old papers in it.
I don't really want to put Julian on the spot and ask him about casting Sharpe members in Downton Abbey. Why it didn't happen. That's a mean question.
It really happened. I was number 2 for Chamberlain in the final series. I was very miffed not to get it. Very miffed not to get it.
I'm bewildered that you didn't get it.
I am too. So are lots of my friends.
I'm actually still waiting to hear back from Julian for Prince and the Pauper. Actually,
What for that?
Yes,
his father.
I think so. Yeah, and I remember. Yeah, I remember it quite well actually. Yeah, but don't worry.
Horrible.
Let it go.
Well, I'm sorry I failed you, chaps.
Not at all.
There we go.
Oh my
There's
goodness.
still time, Julian. We're all available.
We have a question from David Branfield. Jason would like to know, have you ever considered putting down your memoirs and maybe writing a book about Sharpe?
It's funny you should say that, actually. I decided to write everything down, and it's coming out in July the 7th in book form. It's called From Crimea with Love. And if I could explain the title a little bit, I feel that the 3 years in the Crimea really gave Sharpe its look and its feel, and it helped to bond the main characters. That's why it's quite a good thing to watch. And also, I found my love in the Crimea, my voice in the corner there, Natasha. So that's the reason it's called From Crimea with Love. I wanted to call it Life at the Sharp End.
Ah,
But the guys at the publishing thought, no, that's no. They didn't want anything. They didn't want obvious Sharpe in the title, even though they're trading in on all the fans of Sharpe, of course. They didn't want that in the title, yeah. So From Crimea with Love came up in the meeting, and I kind of like it, actually.
There's one from Jordan Pettit. I think we could just go around the room if we finish on this one.
Yeah.
Wants to know, you've kind of all, perhaps not Jason, Julian and Tim, but you guys, chosen men, have become known for Napoleonic stuff. If you could pick any other historical era and go and live in it in something, what would it be? Start with Jason.
You mean a movie, a fiction? Yeah. I would like to. Yeah, I would. I think I'd like to do World War II if we're talking military.
Have you ever done World War II?
No, I did Memphis Belle.
Okay.
Yeah, so a little bit, but I was an American there. And if it wasn't war, I'd love to do a 60s, something set in the 60s with sharp suits and stuff like that.
Paul?
I think World War One would be my choice. It's such a. I mean, it's just so sad, isn't it? There's so much sadness. I mean, that's a bit glib, but yeah, I don't know. Just the best I can come up with just off the top of my head.
Dude, I've just picked my thesis, and it's suicides and self-inflicted wounds in World War One. Someone's got to do it.
Having said that, I'm just like nearly finished reading a book called In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. About some murders that happened in 1959, and that is super interesting as well. And that sort of America in the 50s, that's cool too. That'd be interesting.
Alex.
Yes.
I'll have to tell you sometime. So there was hot on conscientious objectors in World War One.
Yeah.
A very, very sad story of, you might want to include in your dissertation, of one of the guys who was sent to France and escaped execution by the skin of their teeth, and was sent home to do 10 years penal servitude instead. Anyway, so having escaped death in France, he was so depressed, he suffered from depression and threw himself in a river. It was very sad indeed, not long after he got back, and it just seems so, as Paul said, it's full of sadness, stories in World War One. As I'm talking, the period.
Go ahead. Where would you take your wonderful Victorian profile?
Oh, Georgian.
Georgian.
Because I look great in the frocks, and costume designers have told me I've got great calves for the stockings, and I love wearing those breeches and frock coats and the wigs. And if it could be set in Bath as well, that'd be really nice. That would do me. Yeah.
I would say Bridgerton then, but I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. So
I enjoyed seeing you, Michael, in BBC Ghosts.
Yeah, that was sort of Georgian period, wasn't it? Yeah,
nice.
Yeah, no, nice stock there. Yeah.
Well, Michael and I did 12th Night together a few years after Sharpe, and I think you wore stockings in that because, of course, you were Malvolio.
Yeah.
And you wore yellow stockings. I was Ague Cheek. And
you're one of the funniest pratfalls I've ever seen on stage.
Pardon?
Your pratfall as Ague Cheek was one of the funniest things I've ever seen on stage when you collapsed.
My banker, as you called it.
Like a tree trunk. It was fantastic.
I'd show us your calves then, Michael. This is not dangle one in front of the camera now.
Serious? Are you serious? I don't know what state they're in.
Yes, we're serious.
Right.
You can't big it up like that. And Julian's watching. Maybe he's got a Georgian production coming up with calves. Outstanding.
That's outstanding, isn't it?
Fair enough.
Tim, where would you go in history?
Well, I'm just getting my calves out actually.
Yep. And Julian, what about you?
Well, I think if I was going to live in the past, I'd be born in 1830 and die in 1910, but only if I had very good teeth. That would be the criteria.
Yeah,
But
calves
for
and teeth.
I think I'd probably go for the late 18th century because I also like the frogs.
I'm just, you've just made my day that you didn't, nobody said Tudors. We're all bored with the Tudors.
I think Vikings. I'd actually fancy being a Viking. Always fancied that.
You have to let yourself go, don't you? I've only watched a few episodes of it, but it just seems that those guys didn't have to shave, wash, cut their hair, do anything for the whole 5 seasons they were on that.
Like us on Sharpe.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us today to relive filming Sharpe's Rifles with us and talk a little bit about what I think is you're particularly fond of it as actors and participants. So thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for being our host.
Alex. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Alex. Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you guys. Really good to see you. Bye all.
Before we push off, Marcus and Zach created your very own segment on History Hack if people want to hear more about Sharpe and the era and the Peninsular Wars.
There's nothing wrong with the pun. Yeah, so Zach and I have set up sharpshooters for History Hack. And there's basically, I was saying that this is Sharpe's Rifles is the beginning, and there's a missed gap in Bernard Cornwell's books, as much as I love them. We last see Sharpe in Sharpe's Prey leaving Copenhagen, a really interesting kind of spy novel, loads of subterfuge. And then we see him in The Retreat to Corunna. So Zach and I, as huge, I think, fair to say, Sharpe nerds, but also Napoleonic historians, we want to kind of fill in some of the gaps and pay tribute to the history and weave it into the real life and the series we love. So yeah, we're going to do sharpshooters. Well, we are doing. We've started.
You've done the first one, so you did the origins of the Peninsular War.
The origins. So tune in, listen to that, and then we're going to take themes each month. Maybe more frequently, depends how we get on, but definitely each month. We're going to be doing guerrillas next. We're definitely going to be doing a Waterloo special, and very kindly, Professor Tony Pollard of Waterloo Uncovered has agreed to come on and talk about the archaeology, which is changing the way we view Waterloo. It's rewritten some of the myths and the history, and we've got loads more planned that we will take themes. So the guerrillas that we're looking at, you know, we've got Teresa, we've got some of these characters who are more cutthroat, literally. And are they based on real people? Are the guerrillas all the glorious history? Or are they all bandits? Or is there a bit of both, everything in between? So yeah, we're gonna do a bit of that.
Brilliant. And this is the second Thursday of every month, isn't it, that this goes out? So people just need to hop over to Podbean on History Hack, or you can view it on our YouTube channel as well if you want to hear more.
Great.
You can help us at History Hack by joining us via Patreon. It takes quite a lot of effort and a lot of work of quite a big team now to keep us going. And so if you could donate as little as £3 a month, it would be massively appreciated by all of us. There's different levels because Princess Marcus has set it all up with varying rewards and things. So do have a look, do join us. There's an exclusive Facebook group as well, and you can be part of all of it.
When our guests join us to talk about their work and their new book, the 45 minutes or so they spend with us is just a taster of all their efforts. So to this end, we have launched our very own bookshop on bookshop.org, where you can find our guests' latest and greatest books. You can support them, and you can support History Hack too. 10% of every sale via our bookshop supports the podcast and allows us to keep at it and bring you more amazing guests. You can find our bookshop at bookshop.org/shop/hack history, or just search on bookshop.org for us under the shops bit. Thank you for your continued support, and here's to your next great